In May 1942, as the sun set after days of fierce fighting in the Coral Sea, the world seemed to believe that the U.S. Navy's heavy aircraft carrier, USS Yorktown, would not return to the battlefield anytime soon. The Battle of the Coral Sea, the first decisive naval engagement in history in which two fleets had never directly seen each other, left a significant mark on the Pacific theater. There, Lexington, one of the two American carriers involved, was heavily hit by bombs and torpedoes, forcing the crew to abandon ship as it exploded into flames. Her sister ship, Yorktown, escaped such a tragic fate, but was far from intact. Her hull was torn with gaping holes, multiple engine rooms flooded, the flight deck charred black, and the electrical system unstable. To the eyes of the most seasoned engineers, repairing Yorktown would take at least several weeks, if not months. For the Japanese, this outcome was seen as a gift from the sea gods. The Coral Sea engagement had originally been a skirmish to protect their southward advance, but with Lexington sunk and Yorktown badly damaged. Staff officers in Tokyo hastily concluded that the U.S. Navy had only two operational carriers left, Enterprise and Hornet. Strategically, this was vital intelligence. From the start of 1942, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, Commander-in-Chief of the combined fleet, had been nurturing a bold plan to annihilate the U.S. carrier force. After the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, Yamamoto knew Japan could not allow the U.S. time to recover and reinforce. He needed a decisive battle, a perfect ambush, where the entire Japanese fleet would crush the remaining American carriers, paving the way for complete control of the Pacific. This plan, codenamed Operation MI, targeted Midway Island, an important outpost just over 1,000 miles northwest of Pearl Harbor. With its small airstrip, Midway was to be a trap. Yamamoto intended to deploy a massive force, including 4 main carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, along with a powerful supporting fleet, to attack and seize the island. He believed the U.S. would have no choice but to respond to defend Midway, at which point their surviving carriers would fall into a deadly Japanese trap, annihilated by superior firepower. Yamamoto's confidence stemmed from the belief that the opponent's wings had been clipped. With Lexington sunk in the Coral Sea and Yorktown severely damaged, he assumed only Enterprise and Hornet remained capable of fighting. A theoretical 4-to-2 ratio would ensure absolute Japanese superiority. In internal meetings, some Japanese admirals even discussed pressing further after Midway, threatening Hawaii, and forcing the U.S. to negotiate from a weakened position. Yet, while the Japanese indulged in visions of an invincible empire, on the other side of the Pacific, American officers, particularly Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, commander of the Pacific Fleet, adopted a far more pragmatic and cold-eyed perspective. Nimitz knew that entering Midway with only 2 carriers carried a high risk of failure. He needed all 3 at any cost, and Yorktown, though barely breathing after the Coral Sea battle, represented the USS lifeline. On May 27, 1942, Yorktown limped back into Pearl Harbor in a battered state. Surviving photographs show a flight deck scarred by fire, thick black smoke stains, a heavily tilted hull, and cracks running along the starboard side. Naval engineers climbing aboard sighed. Restoring the ship to combat readiness would take 90 days. But Nimitz didn't have 90 days. He didn't even have 9. The Midway battle was expected in less than a week. If Yorktown could not set sail, the U.S. would face the enemy with a drastically reduced force, a gamble almost certain to end in defeat. Faced with this reality, Nimitz made a decision that stunned many. "We have 3 days. 3 days to get Yorktown ready for combat." It wasn't a conventional order. It was more like an ultimatum to the entire Pearl Harbor base. Over 1,400 workers, engineers, sailors, and naval personnel were immediately mobilized, divided into shifts, and worked non-stop. They knew they were not merely repairing a ship, they were holding the fate of the Pacific War in their hands. Meanwhile, the Japanese remained lost in strategic illusions. Intelligence reports confirmed Lexington AS sinking and Yorktown as out of action for an extended period. Japanese intelligence officers had no idea the Americans had cracked their naval codes, a breakthrough that allowed Nimitz to anticipate the Midway plan. More importantly, they could not imagine the speed and determination with which the U.S. would restore combat capability. To Japanese military thinking, repairing a carrier was painstaking work, requiring absolute precision, and thus took weeks or months. They could not believe that any nation could dare, and manage, to return a heavily damaged carrier to battle in just 3 days. This very miscalculation set the stage for one of World War II's greatest shocks. When Yamamoto and his admirals laid their ambush plan, they did not account for the possibility that the Americans could deploy 3 carriers. Confident that Midway would repeat the success of Pearl Harbor, a fast, powerful, and decisive strike, they were oblivious to the reality that thousands of American workers at Pearl Harbor were staying up all night, patching Yorktown's holes with temporary steel plates, pouring concrete into damaged compartments, reconstructing the patched-up electrical systems with hastily run wires, and even reinforcing weak structures with wood. All of this effort ensured that when the Japanese fleet appeared off Midway, they would face not 2, but 3 monstrous carriers: Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown. On May 27, 1942, as USS Yorktown limped into Pearl Harbor, the sight sent shivers through many of her crew. The ship no longer bore the proud stature of a carrier that had once dominated the Coral Sea. The flight deck was scarred with burn marks. Parts of the steel frame were warped. Thick black smoke clung to the bulkheads, and the pungent smell of oil and gunpowder lingered. Many sailors were exhausted, bandaged from head to toe, their eyes hollow. Across the hull, gaping wounds served as a grim reminder that Yorktown had come perilously close to sharing Lexington's fate, the sister ship now resting at the bottom of the sea. Naval engineers climbed aboard, carefully inspecting every crack, every scorched wire. The initial assessment was grim. It would take at least 90 days to return the ship to combat readiness. Boilers were severely damaged, some engine rooms flooded, supporting beams bent, and fuel lines perforated in multiple places. In theory, fast repairs were impossible. Yet standing before them, Admiral Chester W. Nimitz refused to accept impossibility. He had only a few days to prepare for the Battle of Midway, a fight that could determine the fate of the entire Pacific War. And then he uttered a sentence that stunned everyone. "You have 3 days. 3 days to get Yorktown ready to sail." The order sounded like a battle horn. Immediately, over 1,400 workers, engineers, welders, and sailors were mobilized, divided into 24-hour shifts. Pearl Harbor transformed into a colossal work site. That night, welding flames lit up the deck, hammers clanged relentlessly, and machinery roared without pause. Day and night lost meaning. Only the frantic pace of a race against destiny remained. The engineers knew they couldn't repair the ship according to standard protocols. Following proper procedures would never be fast enough. Instead, they adopted a mantra: quick, temporary, just enough to fight. Large holes in the hull were patched with hastily stacked steel plates. Damaged compartments were filled with concrete or reinforced with wood. Burned-out electrical wiring was jury-rigged to keep lights and generators running. In some areas, crude wooden beams temporarily replaced broken steel supports. It wasn't perfection. It was an emergency patchwork, but one that could save an entire fleet. Work was carried out simultaneously across every section. On deck, dozens of welders took turns fusing metal plates, sweat streaming down their faces, sparks casting red glows. Below decks, sailors waded through filthy water, shoving in wood and pouring cement to seal breaches. In the engine rooms, engineers scrutinized every boiler and pipe, striving to restore enough power for Yorktown to maneuver and launch aircraft. The air was thick with smoke, oil, burning metal, and tension beyond measure. Yorktown's crew, fresh from the bloody Coral Sea, did not falter. They joined the repairs, carrying steel, wielding hammers, and replacing cables alongside workers. They knew that their lives, their comrades, and the fate of the nation depended on whether this ship could sail on time. One sailor later recalled, "We worked as if hypnotized. Time ceased to exist. All that mattered was finishing, getting Yorktown back into the skies of the Pacific." Meanwhile, Nimitz was constantly present, urging and motivating. Every passing hour was more precious than gold. The pressure on him was immense. If Yorktown didn't sail, America would have only 2 carriers against Japan's 4, a gamble nearly certain to fail. A defeat at Midway could threaten Hawaii and place the U.S. entirely on the defensive. On the first day, workers reinforced the hull, welded large holes, and strengthened structures to prevent flooding. By the second night, attention shifted to electrical systems and boilers, temporarily connecting circuits and repairing just enough for Yorktown to operate at 25 knots. By the third day, the focus moved to the flight deck, repairing it so planes could take off and land, replacing ammunition elevators and restoring aircraft lifts, essential for carrier operations. For 72 hours, thousands worked almost without sleep. Welders collapsed on deck, shaken awake by colleagues to resume work. Engineers burned by sparks quickly bandaged themselves and continued. All understood that they stood on the thin line between defeat and victory. By May 30th, what had seemed impossible became reality. USS Yorktown, battered after the Coral Sea, had become a combat-ready warship, operating at roughly 85% of her original strength. Imperfect, but enough to sail. As the ship's horn sounded and she departed Pearl Harbor, thousands on the shore looked on, many moved to tears. They knew they had helped write a chapter that could alter the course of the war. Across the Pacific, the Japanese still believed Yorktown was out of action. No officer could imagine that, in just 3 days, the ship would stand tall alongside Enterprise and Hornet, ready to fight. Yorktown's presence at Midway would shock not only strategically but psychologically, a slap to the overconfidence of the Empire of the Rising Sun. Those 72 hours with sweat, blood, and tears transformed Yorktown into a symbol of American industrial spirit and indomitable will, a testament that even when seemingly defeated, they could rise, patch together, and charge into a decisive battle. With just one additional carrier, the balance of power at Midway would shift entirely. 3 days, 72 hours. A miracle that not only saved a ship, but an entire fleet. And as Yorktown pointed her bow to the sea, carrying her air squadrons, everyone involved in that race knew they had created a miracle. On June 2, 1942, as Yorktown rendezvoused with the remaining 2 carriers, Enterprise and Hornet, at Point Luck, 325 nautical miles northeast of Midway, the sky was calm yet tense, stretched tight like a bowstring. The crews of all 3 ships remained silent, unwilling to disturb the heavy but determined atmosphere. For the pilots and sailors, the sight was almost unbelievable. Yorktown, the ship they had believed lost at the Coral Sea, now appeared intact and ready for combat. Pilots aboard Enterprise and Hornet watched in astonishment as Yorktown's air squadrons conducted pre-flight preparations. The patched flight deck, temporary welds, and ammunition lifts, still protruding with steel fragments, all functioned perfectly. It was not perfection, it was survival, a power forged from the spirit and labor of thousands at Pearl Harbor. Commander W.D.E. McCluskey, leading Enterprise's air squadron, murmured, "We thought she'd be a slow backup ship, hard to maneuver. Instead, Yorktown is like a new warrior, ready for battle." Meanwhile, Japanese observers on Hiryu's deck peered through binoculars in disbelief. Before them was a truth utterly contrary to all intelligence reports. 3 American carriers floated on the sea, not 2. From initial observation, they estimated around 230 U.S. aircraft, not 150, upending every pre-planned strategy. Yorktown's presence did more than bolster U.S. strength. It shattered Japanese strategic assumptions. Admiral Yamaguchi aboard Hiryu immediately realized that their carefully prepared ambush plan, months in the making, had become meaningless. Japanese officers ran frantically across the deck trying to issue new orders, but all calculations had collapsed. There was no time to adjust. The American squadrons were already taking off. On the early morning of June 4th, alarm bells rang across Yorktown's deck. Pilots, many survivors of Coral Sea, were organized into mixed squadrons. Bombing Squadron 3, drawn from Saratoga, Torpedo Squadron 3 from leftover pilots of other squadrons, and Fighting Squadron 3 from 3 previously uncoordinated units. All knew this battle might be the only chance to alter the Pacific War's course. The Japanese quickly noticed this unexpected development. Admiral Nagumo maintained composure, but confidence was steadily eroding. 4 Japanese carriers, once calculated to dominate 2 American ships, now faced 3, one being Yorktown, the very ship they had presumed destroyed. The tempo of combat shifted within minutes. American squadrons rose into the sky, carrying with them the astonishment of the Japanese crew. The first attack wave came from Hornet and Enterprise, but Yorktown, though not fully restored, launched SBD Dauntless dive bombers. Yorktown's planes struck Japanese ships like a lightning bolt. Remarkably, a small boiler delay at Pearl Harbor had positioned her squadrons to arrive precisely in coordination with Enterprise. A fortunate coincidence, but also a testament to rapid planning and execution. Within minutes, Soryu, one of the 4 Japanese carriers, was hit by 3 bombs from Yorktown's planes. Flames erupted violently, smoke columns soared hundreds of meters, and sailors on other decks trembled in fear. They could not believe that a ship they had supposedly defeated only 27 days prior had reappeared and attacked effectively. Japanese pilots attempted to counterattack, but their rhythm was disrupted. U.S. torpedo planes had lowered anti-aircraft formations, preparing for the next strike. In this chaotic moment, Yorktown was more than a ship. It became a living symbol of American resolve, battered, damaged, yet charging into battle, astonishing and confounding the enemy. Yorktown's squadrons, despite differing levels of experience, operated like a cohesive unit thanks to skilled leadership and fierce fighting spirit. Some Japanese pilots recognized Yorktown as the ship they had attacked at Coral Sea, but too late. Bombs were already exploding on Soryu's deck, beginning a chain of disaster for the Japanese fleet. Meanwhile, Yorktown continued to operate despite further damage from counterattacks. Emergency repairs from Pearl Harbor proved effective. Steel patches held, jury-rigged wiring maintained aircraft systems, and basic boilers enabled Yorktown to maneuver at sufficient speed to continue fighting. By 12:05 p.m., the second Japanese strike targeted Yorktown. 3 bombs hit, igniting fierce fires and damaging some steam lines. The crew sprang into action. Within 2 hours, engineers restarted boilers, pumped flooded compartments, and stabilized the ship by redistributing weight. By 1:40 p.m., Yorktown was moving at nearly 19 knots, enough to continue supporting combat operations. Japanese pilots approached, mistaking her for an undamaged ship. They had yet to realize the miraculous return of Yorktown. This confusion created a golden opportunity for U.S. squadrons. Enterprise and Hornet coordinated with Yorktown to strike relentlessly at the remaining Japanese carriers. Soryu was decisively destroyed by Yorktown's bombs. Hiryu and Kaga sustained heavy damage from American squadrons. By evening, only a single Japanese carrier remained operational. Throughout the battle, Yorktown's strategic value surpassed raw firepower. Her very existence forced the enemy to disperse forces and make hasty, flawed decisions. Japanese sailors had never faced a ship presumed dead, suddenly revived and attacking with precision. Their confidence in certain victory was shattered in mere hours. As dusk fell, black smoke and flames still rose from Japanese decks, aircraft losses were enormous, and Yorktown had fulfilled her role. Not only a warship, but a catalyst of panic, upending the entire Japanese strategy. Her timely reappearance after 3 days of rapid repairs at Pearl Harbor proved a crucial fact. American will and industrial capability could defy tradition and overcome even seemingly superior enemies. The battle had only begun, but Yorktown's presence marked the first decisive stroke, setting off a chain of events that turned Japanese confidence into confusion and ultimately defeat at Midway. 3 days at Pearl Harbor, 1,400 workers, 72 hours of relentless labor had transformed a seemingly lost ship into a living symbol of victory. Yorktown had not only saved herself but preserved the U.S. fleet's chance for success, altering the course of the Pacific War. On June 4, 1942, as columns of smoke rose from the Japanese carriers against the Blue Sea, Yorktown continued her mission. Despite having endured bomb hits on her flight deck, boiler damage, and fires in various compartments, the ship maintained sufficient speed to operate her air squadrons, coordinating with Enterprise and Hornet to strike Japanese forces. The moment's importance lay not just in firepower, but also in its psychological impact on the enemy. Japanese pilots, accustomed to fighting foes they believed completely defeated, now faced a ship thought sunk, yet revived, operating effectively. Yorktown's attack waves were coordinated and precise, almost as if pre-calculated. SBD Dauntless dive bombers from Yorktown struck Soryu, landing 3 direct hits, causing the Japanese carrier to erupt in flames and eventually explode, extinguishing itself on the sea. This was the first blow in a series of disasters for the Japanese fleet. Hiryu and Kaga suffered heavy damage from coordinated American squadrons, but continued to fight back. By 12:05 p.m., another Japanese strike targeted Yorktown. 3 bombs struck her flight deck and engine compartments, igniting new fires. Yet the ship's morale and temporary repairs performed at Pearl Harbor proved vital. Engineers restarted boilers, pumped water into flooded compartments to stabilize the ship, and contained fire spread. By 1:40 p.m., Yorktown was moving at nearly 19 knots, enabling her squadrons to continue operations. This rapid recovery not only saved Yorktown in battle, but also protected Enterprise and Hornet from targeted attacks. Thanks to Yorktown's pilots, U.S. forces gained a strategic advantage, forcing Japanese carriers to disperse and lose control of the situation. Yorktown ensured Soryu's destruction, contributed to damaging Hiryu, and absorbed numerous attacks that might have hit Enterprise and Hornet. By the night of June 4th, Yorktown was exhausted, ablaze, and damaged. Remarkably, despite the attacks and harm, she remained operational, allowing rescue and continued combat until the last moment. The following morning, U.S. ships began towing Yorktown out of danger. However, on June 6th, the Japanese submarine I-168, commanded by Lieutenant Commander Yahachi Tanabe, fired 4 torpedoes, 2 striking Yorktown, 1 hitting the destroyer USS Hammond. Yorktown listed and ultimately sank on June 7, 1942, ending the life of one of America's most crucial carriers in World War II. Yet Yorktown's value extended beyond battle. It represented a legacy of industrial and human spirit. The 72-hour rapid repair at Pearl Harbor by 1,400 workers shattered all industrial norms Japan had relied upon. Perfection was unnecessary, long timelines irrelevant. Only efficiency and determination mattered. Every temporary, imperfect repair demonstrated a key aspect of modern warfare. Willpower and adaptability could overcome technology and tradition. Surviving Midway pilots and crew repeatedly emphasized that Yorktown's appearance reshaped Japanese strategic calculations. Commander Mitsuo Fuida, an observer at Pearl Harbor, later wrote, "The appearance of a ship we thought dead at a critical moment shattered all our plans. Every assumption before Midway was based on the U.S. having only 2 carriers. The third appeared, and everything collapsed. Even after Yorktown sank, her strategic influence endured. Lessons in rapid repairs, prioritizing functionality over form, and maximizing resources were widely adopted across the U.S. Navy. The Pearl Harbor workers, though largely unrecognized, proved that civilian labor could determine battle outcomes and that American industrial organization could respond with unprecedented speed. Yorktown's legacy persisted in the Yorktown Standard, a naval engineering model focusing on rapid restoration over perfection, applied to carriers and fleets in subsequent campaigns. This principle extended to weapons, aircraft, and other military equipment. If a system did not need to be perfect but functional for combat, speed and adaptability became decisive. In 1998, Robert Ballard located USS Yorktown at a depth of 16,750 feet, upright, with overlapping steel plates and bomb-damaged hull sections intact, testifying to the ship's resilience and the temporary repairs performed at Pearl Harbor. A plaque at Dry Dock No. 1 in Pearl Harbor now reads, "In 72 hours, American workers achieved the impossible, repairing USS Yorktown for the Battle of Midway. Their effort changed history." Yorktown became a vivid example that victory relied not solely on technology or weaponry, but on willpower, creativity, and collective coordination. The Battle of Midway demonstrated that 3 days at Pearl Harbor did more than save a ship. They altered the course of the Pacific War. Anonymous engineers, welders, and electricians proved a philosophy. When humans focus and commit, nothing is impossible. Yorktown was more than a carrier. She symbolized American industrial democracy, where innovation, speed, and adaptability triumphed over rigid procedures. This philosophy enabled rapid production feats, from building Liberty ships in 4 days, B-24 bombers in 63 minutes, to developing the atomic bomb in 3 years, all guided by the same principle: efficiency, speed, creativity. The Battle of Midway concluded with 4 Japanese carriers destroyed and 1 U.S. carrier lost, Yorktown, yet her strategic impact remained. Japanese pilots never fully realized that the ship they believed defeated was both a strategic weapon and a morale symbol, prompting miscalculations and the loss of irreplaceable advantage. Yorktown's story continues to be taught across the U.S. Navy, from officers to damage control personnel. If she rises, she can fight. If workers focus, anything is possible. Every naval trainee knows that in war, time and adaptability can outweigh any procedure or advanced technology. Yorktown sank to the bottom of the Pacific, but the will, spirit, and lessons she embodied remain. 3 days at Pearl Harbor proved that human and organizational capability could surpass any technology or strategy. American workers did more than repair a ship. They sent a global message: nothing is impossible with determination and smart effort. Midway ended with Japan losing its Pacific advantage, and Yorktown, even in sinking, became an enduring symbol. The lessons from 72 hours of rapid repairs remain alive in every naval campaign, affirming that speed, efficiency, creativity, and teamwork can change history. Yorktown's story is not just about a ship, it is the story of an entire nation's capacity to surpass its limits. The life of USS Yorktown is a sequence of technical and human miracles. From the Battle of the Coral Sea, where she was thought sunk, to the 72-hour rapid repairs at Pearl Harbor, and finally her sudden appearance at Midway, Yorktown proved that war is determined not only by weapons or numbers, but by spirit, creativity, and human will. The first lesson Yorktown taught the U.S. Navy and the world was the power of rapid adaptation. Realizing that a heavily damaged carrier could return to sea in 72 hours, American commanders understood that nothing was fixed, and all assumptions about the enemy had to be continuously reassessed. In modern strategy, time is always critical. Unlike Japan, whose plans relied on rigid assumptions about enemy capabilities, the U.S. demonstrated that the seemingly impossible could happen if human effort and technology were properly mobilized. Yorktown's restoration also highlighted the importance of civilian industry in modern warfare. 3 days at Pearl Harbor were more than repairing a ship. They symbolized a nation's collective capability. 1,400 workers, from welders to electricians, machinists to mechanical engineers, coordinated in a chaotic yet effective effort, improvising creative, temporary, but combat-ready solutions. They did not follow traditional procedures. They created them on the spot, prioritizing combat capability over perfection. This clearly demonstrated that American industrial power lay not only in mass production, but in innovation and adaptability under pressure. The Midway strategy proved that Yorktown, even as a single carrier, reshaped Japanese calculations. Before the battle, they expected to face 2 U.S. carriers. Yorktown's appearance collapsed every plan. Japanese pilots could not locate the advantage, attacks were scattered, and the result was the comprehensive defeat of the Japanese fleet. This is proof that an unexpected factor, combined with initiative and rapid response, can overturn the battlefield. Another key lesson is the prioritization of function over form. While Japan emphasized perfection, craftsmanship, and time, the U.S. showed that rapid combat readiness was more important than traditional technical standards. Overlapping steel plates, temporary compartments, and jury-rigged electrical systems proved that in war, good enough to fight matters more than perfect but delayed. This principle was applied throughout World War II. From building Liberty ships in 4 days, B-24 bombers in under an hour, to the atomic bomb program. Yorktown also demonstrated the power of intelligence and interforce coordination. Before Midway, decrypted JN-25 codes from Station Hypo enabled American commanders to know the Japanese attack schedule and targets precisely. Yorktown's presence at Midway was not accidental. It was the result of effective intelligence combined with industry and military determination. Without rapid repair capabilities and coordinated information, the U.S. fleet could have faced serious disadvantages, and the outcome at Midway would have been very different. Yorktown left a lasting lesson in national spirit and collective power. The workers received no medals and appeared little in formal history, yet they changed the course of the war through ordinary labor applied extraordinarily effectively. This shows that in modern warfare, all social strata, from naval commanders to technical workers, play decisive roles. Coordination and voluntary effort beyond normal limits are decisive, often surpassing weapons and strategy. In the long term, Yorktown's philosophy became a core principle of the U.S. Navy: fast repairs, restore combat capability first, prioritize function, innovate under pressure, and remain flexible in decisions. Every naval officer today learns that survivability and rapid re-engagement are paramount, and a fleet cannot be defeated if it can recover quickly and effectively. These lessons also influenced military industry and management, emphasizing that speed and creativity can outweigh careful but slow planning. Yorktown became a symbol of faith in human capability to surpass imagined limits. When Japan saw Yorktown at Midway, they did not just see a carrier. They saw American spirit, industry, and willpower embodied in steel and machinery. The ship became proof of a long-standing principle in warfare: an enemy cannot defeat a nation willing to adapt, determined, and act swiftly. Finally, Yorktown teaches a lesson about risk and strategic decision-making. American commanders took a huge risk sending a nearly damaged ship into battle, but this boldness was supported by industry, intelligence, and crew skill, producing results beyond expectation. This demonstrates that in war, the ability to take calculated risks and leverage all available resources can determine the outcome. Today, USS Yorktown, resting on the Pacific seabed, remains a vivid symbol of the fusion of human will, industry, creativity, and national spirit. Midway stands as proof of the principle: speed and efficiency over perfection, with Yorktown at its center. Not only American naval officers, but the global military-industrial complex looks to Yorktown as a model for recovery and adaptability in modern warfare. Yorktown's story also shows that victory does not always reside in textbooks or technical procedures. It lies in the spirit of perseverance, creativity under pressure, and individuals willing to complete the mission for the collective goal. Every weld, cable, and steel plate on Yorktown exemplifies this principle. The strategic consequence is clear. The Battle of Midway marked a turning point in the Pacific theater, ending Japan's streak of victories and ushering in an era of American initiative. In all these victories, Yorktown represented the American spirit, where speed, determination, and innovation triumphed over the enemy's perfectionism and rigid tradition. Looking back at the story, from Coral Sea Pearl Harbor to Midway, Yorktown teaches many vital lessons. Willpower can overcome technical limits. Intelligence can become strategic power. Civilian industry can decide battle outcomes, and every individual matters in the totality of modern warfare. This is why Yorktown is honored not merely as a ship, but as a symbol of achieving the seemingly impossible. 3 days at Pearl Harbor, 3 days that made a difference across the entire Pacific War, prove a fundamental principle. If people are determined, cooperate efficiently, and act swiftly, nothing is impossible. USS Yorktown was not just a combat carrier. She was a model of democratic, industrial, and human strength, and her story continues to inspire future generations, reminding us that any challenge can be overcome when people work together with resolve and creativity.